I'm Dana Han-Klein here with Bart Layton for American Animals.
Which character do you think you're the most like, and why?
I think we're all most of us are more like Spencer. Mm-hmm. You know, kind of, we're not the sort of charismatic lunatic. We all know one of those guys.
Follow them into battle.
Follow them into deep trouble. I suppose I can relate to Spencer in terms of his need to, you know, thinking he's an artist and feeling like he doesn't really have the essential criteria that, you know, all artists need, which in his mind is to have suffered greatly. I think I probably had a slightly tougher life than he did, and he was, you know, his whole problem is that he doesn't really have a problem, but he needs one in order to make great art. I thought that was kind of interesting in terms of, you know, a starting point for a character, you know, that he needs to have some suffering or something in order to know what he's made of or know who he is. I think, yeah, so he probably, I think I made him the sort of the audience proxy, you know, the sort of, he's our narrator in a way. He's our way into the movie. I can relate to him a little bit, and I can relate to Warren, I suppose, you know, wanting to shake everything up and sort of be rebellious, but not really knowing what he's rebelling against, you know. So,
who do you admire the most?
Who
would you like to be the most like?
I'm not sure. I mean, I'm fond of them. I'm fond of the real guys. You know, they've become friends. I'm not sure that I admire them particularly, although, you know, now that, you know, they're 10 years older and they're wiser and they've learned lessons, yes, and they've served their time, you know. You know, Warren is someone who, if you spend time with him, he's larger than life, and he is fun to be around, and he's trouble, you know. And so I admire the fact that, you know, I guess it applies to all of them. They haven't let the fact that they made a very big mistake kind of destroy their lives. You know, they've learned from it as best they can, and they've tried to, you know, move forward and make useful human beings of themselves. So, you know, but I'm not sure I admire them or what they did, but I admire their honesty, and I admire them for sharing their story in the way that they did.
If you could have a rare book, any rare book in your house collection, whatever, let's say you acquire it legally, what would it be?
I mean, I guess having spent all of this time, you know, with this story, it would probably have to be the Audubon, because it is genuinely like a work of art. It's just beautiful. You know, when you're close to it, you're like, you start to see the magic in it. And, you know, I was like, you know, how exciting is a book ever really going to get, even if it is the world's most expensive book? But then you realize it is a piece of art for sure. But then, you know, you see some of those other books, like the illuminated manuscript, which is another of the books that was stolen, and it is like touching a piece of history. It's like touching something, you know, it was created in the 15th century or 14th century, and, you know, it's painted with gold leaf, and it's kind of extraordinary, and you're like, oh wow, you're holding something that's traveled through time, which is pretty amazing.
Is it fair to assume that you got to see the original pieces?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Did you tell them what you were making as a film, and did that set off alarms to them?
No, I saw the original pieces I saw the books that were stolen in the place they were.
Since?
Security is.
Okay, just checking.
I mean, it has definitely improved. I'm not sure it's not Fort Knox, but it's definitely improved. Yeah.
Did they ever apologize?
Yeah.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah, they did. I mean, you know.
I mean, there's admitting guilt and, like, pleading guilty and all that stuff, but then there's, like, apologizing.
No, they did, and, you know, actually, they apologized more recently, when I was interviewing them, I asked them, was there anything they wanted to say to the librarian? They all recorded these I think they were very honest, heartfelt, truthful, and remorseful apologies, which I haven't shown them to the librarian yet. Although she says, having watched the film, she's now ready to, she feels a lot more like she can forgive them now.
Did you film those for purposes of film, or was it like privately just
kind of a bit of both, really?
Is there a reason you didn't use them? Just out of curiosity.
I didn't feel like it was appropriate to give them that opportunity to sort of publicly. I felt like, you see their remorse, you see that, and I think, but it didn't feel right to give them a kind of platform for that, for that apology.
Yeah, you don't get like a carte blanche for
exactly, yeah.
How do you strike the balance of integrating like the real guys and the actors? Because I love the scenes where it's sort of mixed.
I mean, that was very tightly woven into the script, but until you get into the edit, you don't really know whether this brilliant idea that you've convinced everyone is going to be like this revolutionary way of telling a true story is going to work. And but it's very much as per the screenplay. I wanted it to be very limited, the non-fiction stuff, just enough to remind you, hey, wake up, this is a true story, remember, and then there's a place in the movie where I wanted it to disappear, where you are encouraged to, like the characters, you slowly kind of lose touch with reality. And so I sort of, it was very conscious decision to kind of find a rhythm for it, so that it comes and it goes, and then it goes, and then it comes back at a point where you've kind of gone a long way into the fantasy with them.
If you were to pick a movie heist to like try and implement, what would it be?
What, you mean like one that I thought could successfully be...
Or just one that's so crazy that you just were like, I gotta try this?
Maybe the Thomas Crown Affair version. Okay. It's pretty well thought out, that one.
That's true.
Yeah.
Which of the actors ended up being most like the characters that they were going to portray? And did they sort of evolve into those personalities as you went along?
Yeah, they did in a way. I mean, they all kind of became those characters. I mean, Evan is a very serious actor, and he tends to inhabit his character and really go deep. And he became very Warren-like, probably not as unpredictable and kind of outrageous as Warren, but he was as intense for sure. The one that probably became most like his character, and in real life is not in any way like his character, is Jared, who plays Eric. They became, they talk alike, they look a little bit alike, they became very, in his character, he's the kind of brain, and he's the sort of, the guy who's most sort of quiet and serious and watchful. Whereas in real life, Jared is a lunatic, We're going to
go kind of rapid fire with these. Like, first thing that comes to mind?
Yeah.
What inspires you?
The theatre, and, I've been to, I've kind of rediscovered the theatre recently and how inspiring that is. That you can go into this place, it doesn't even need to be a set, and they don't even need to be in costumes or anything, and suddenly you're transported to this whole other place, and all you're watching is a group of 3 people just on a bare stage. I was kind of reminded of the power of storytelling recently, and seeing a really basic, brilliant play, but really basically staged, and it was set in like the deep south, and you can hear like the cicadas in the trees, and you can feel the heat. And I was in a cold theatre in central London, so that I find is super inspiring. I guess just, storytelling.
What frustrates you?
In the context of making a movie, what frustrates me is people who claim to have certain abilities that they in reality don't have. That's very frustrating. That's the only time that I would, and I think probably in life that's frustrating. People promising and not delivering is really frustrating.
How do you define personal success now versus maybe earlier in your career?
That's a great question. And you know what? I think it's something that really, that plugs into the theme of this movie, which is about, like, what does success look like? For these kids, their parents are successful. They got nice house, nice car, nice life. Like, but for them, that's not success. That's like mediocrity. That's just being ordinary. And that's really a part. That's and I think it's something that I think culturally we're in a place where your success is defined by how many fucking Twitter followers have you got? How many Instagram followers? How many
social currency?
Right, and that's a good way of putting it. Social currency. How much social currency do you have? Does the fact that you have more Twitter followers than me make you more important? No, you definitely. I'm sure you will. But anyway, and that is a motivating factor in what happened with this crime, with this robbery. The need to be special, the need to be remarkable in some way. So. But when you ask me personally, like, I feel like, there's an expectation in, like, the movie business. You make a small movie, you get to make a bigger one. You make a bigger one, you don't mess that up. You might get to make a really big one. And actually, you make that really big one, you probably have no fun doing it. You probably have 50,000 studio executives breathing down your neck. And, I'm sure some people that love that. But for me, personal success is like, is having something approaching a lifestyle that enables you to have a family and be with that family and be present for your kids growing up. That's a big thing. But also tell stories that you feel like are worth telling, rather than like, oh, what, I'm going to spend 2 years of my life telling a story that on its best day might be a movie that I would watch on an airplane. Why would you, why bother? So being able to be creatively free to do the things that, tell the stories that you feel like are worth telling, not just because, you need to pay the bills, but that, but I definitely I'm not worried. And in a way, when I was younger, I might have wanted to be more of like publicly successful. Now I just feel like it's just about being able to do the shit you want to do, really, and not do the stuff you don't want to do.
What's some of the best advice you've been given?
And I can't remember whose advice it is, but the best advice, I think, when it comes to, like, if you want to have a career in a creative industry, if you want to write a book or write a film or make a film or make a documentary, the best advice, I think, is to show up and do it, to start doing it. So, like, it's amazing how when you start doing it, stuff starts to fall into place, and you actually find that this thing that felt impossible, you might just be able to do it. If you have a story you want to tell, you start writing it, and it's much more likely to happen than if you don't. The starting is the biggest, it's that, what's that thing? It's like a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step or something, that single step, because there's so many people who just talk endlessly. I mean, we all do it. I'm terribly guilty of it. Endless talk and not doing. And then you start doing the thing that you like, oh, I always wanted to write a novel. You just start doing it. Get the paper out or get the laptop out and start doing it. That's, and then, like, the universe or whatever it is conspires to help you get the next bit. That I think is true.
What's some of the worst advice you've been given?
People endlessly will tell you that things don't work. That there's a specific way of constructing a story, that it has to, that a narrative or whatever it is or anything has to have a certain formula for it to work. And people quote, that every story forms, possibly, but that really is bullshit. That there aren't any rules to any of it. And the most interesting things happen when you ignore that, when you ignore the rules of, and even great creatives and screenwriters or whoever, will be convinced that there's a very specific way to structure a story or whatever it is. And truth is that, I think, is dangerous, because then you're just doing versions of things that have been done.
So my last question is, growing up, who was your favorite fictional protagonist or villain?
I loved the character that Paul Newman played in The Sting. I kind of wanted to be that guy. And I also, those kinds of movies, and also, Butch and Sundance, those, I always had a obsession with, American iconic kind of movies, particularly Westerns and those things. I was obsessed with Clint Eastwood and the spaghetti Westerns and all of those kind of things. And, probably after you leave, I'll remember exactly who that person was. But yeah, that was one of the first that came to mind.
Well, thank you so much. Congrats on the film.
Thanks. Pleasure.